Good morning. Welcome to Kenya News Update today. In a city where the cost of living continues to squeeze household budgets, access to education remains a critical battleground. This week, Embakasi East MP and Nairobi gubernatorial hopeful Babu Owino took his bursary distribution drive to the neighborhoods of Soweto in Lower Savannah Ward and Donholm. The event, held this past Tuesday, saw the distribution of bursary forms aimed at supporting students from what he termed vulnerable families. But beneath this act of political philanthropy lies a complex web of questions about timing, motive, and the systemic challenges of education funding in Kenya's capital. Today, we dive deep into the numbers, the narratives, and the national context. Is this a genuine lifeline for struggling families, or a well-timed political maneuver in the long game for City Hall? We'll present multiple perspectives, analyze the data, and explore what this means for the future of Nairobi's politics and its people. Let's begin with the event itself. According to reports from Capital FM, Babu Owino distributed bursary forms to residents in these two distinct areas: Soweto, a densely populated informal settlement in Lower Savannah Ward, and Donholm, a more established, middle-income neighborhood. The MP stated the exercise was aimed at helping students remain in school and pursue their dreams without being held back by lack of fees. He emphasized education as a key pillar of his representation. The imagery was powerful, the MP engaging directly with constituents, forms changing hands, promises of support. But to understand the full picture, we need to look at the backdrop against which this is happening. Nairobi County has been grappling with a severe education funding crisis. The national government's capitation to schools often arrives late and is insufficient to cover rising operational costs. This trickles down to parents through incessant demands for fees, building funds, and activity contributions. For families in informal settlements like Soweto, where daily income is unpredictable, these demands can force a heartbreaking choice: food on the table or a child in school. In Donholm, the struggle is different but no less real. The middle class is being eroded by inflation, job losses, and stagnant wages. School fees for even public day schools have become a significant monthly burden. This is the fertile ground in which political interventions like bursary distributions take root. Now, let's talk about the bursary system itself. In Kenya, constituency development funds, or CDF, allocate a portion for bursaries. MPs are tasked with overseeing the distribution of these funds through committees. The process is supposed to be transparent and needs-based. However, critics have long argued that the system is vulnerable to politicization, with funds sometimes directed to political allies or used as a tool for voter mobilization ahead of elections. This brings us to the critical question of timing. Babu Owino is not just the MP for Embakasi East, he is a declared candidate for Nairobi governor in the 2027 elections. That election is now just under 2 years away. The political calendar is heating up. Analysts point to a pattern where incumbent MPs and aspirants for higher office significantly ramp up constituency service activities in the 2-year run-up to a general election. This isn't unique to Babu Owino. It's a documented political strategy across the country. The distribution in Soweto and Donholm fits neatly into this pre-election cycle. But does the motive negate the impact? To answer that, we need to examine the scale and scope of the intervention. Specific numbers from Tuesday's event are scarce in initial reports, but we can look at historical data from the Embakasi East CDF to gauge typical volumes. In the last completed financial year, the Embakasi East National Government Constituencies Development Fund allocated approximately 42 million Kenyan shillings for bursaries. Out of that total fund, records show that about 1,800 applications were received from across the constituency. From that pool, the bursary committee selected and awarded 1,200 successful beneficiaries. That's a success rate of roughly 67%. The average award per student was 35,000 shillings. Let's visualize that process. The journey from application to award is competitive. For every 3 students who apply, only 2 receive funding. The one left out represents a family that must find an alternative, often at great personal cost. Now, let's contrast this with the national picture. According to the Ministry of Education's latest statistics, the national demand for bursary support far outstrips supply. In the 2024 financial year, the total CDF bursary allocation across all 290 constituencies was about 12 billion shillings. However, estimates from education advocacy groups suggest the actual need, based on poverty indices and school enrollment data, is closer to 45 billion shillings. This creates a massive funding gap of 33 billion shillings. That gap is filled by parental sacrifice, child labor, or, tragically, school dropout. The situation in Nairobi is particularly acute. With a high concentration of low-income households and a higher cost of living, the pressure on the CDF bursary kitty is immense. Nairobi's 17 constituencies must serve a population where, according to the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics, nearly 30% of residents live below the poverty line. When Babu Owino speaks of vulnerable families, he is referring to a significant portion of his electorate. But his actions also invite scrutiny from political opponents and governance experts. We spoke to several analysts for this report. One perspective, from a political strategist based in Nairobi, argues that this is smart, effective politics. The strategist, who requested anonymity, said, "He is playing the game by the established rules. Direct, tangible benefit to voters is the currency of Kenyan politics." By being visible and distributing forms himself, he creates a personal connection that transcends the bureaucratic CDF process. For the residents receiving those forms, the MP is the direct source of hope. That is invaluable for 2027. Another perspective comes from a governance and anti-corruption activist. She takes a more critical view. While helping a child stay in school is always a positive outcome, we must ask why these interventions are so episodic and personality-driven. A robust, transparent, and predictable bursary system would not require an MP to make a public spectacle of form distribution. The current system keeps beneficiaries dependent on the goodwill of the individual politician, not on their right as citizens to equitable public services. It perpetuates a patronage system. A third perspective comes from the ground. We contacted a community organizer in Soweto who shared this. "Look, the people here are not naive, they know it's politics. But when your child has been sent home for fees and you have no other option, you will take help from wherever it comes, be it an MP, a church, or a well-wisher. The problem is systemic, but the solution today is that bursary form. So yes, we take it. But we also know it's a sticking plaster on a deep wound." These contrasting views highlight the dual reality of such events. They are both an immediate relief and a symptom of a deeper dysfunction. Let's also consider the geographical choice of Soweto and Donholm. Soweto is a classic informal settlement, a stronghold of voter turnout, and often a focal point for political messaging about uplifting the poor. Donholm represents the aspirational lower middle class, a demographic that is increasingly vocal about service delivery and economic pressures. By targeting both in a single drive, the MP is covering a broad socio-economic spectrum within his constituency. It's a demonstration of a representative serving all tiers of his society. But critics might ask, why these two wards now? Were they underserved in previous bursary cycles? Is this addressing a historical imbalance, or is it about maximizing visibility in key areas? Without transparent, ward-level data on past disbursements, it's difficult to answer conclusively. This opacity is part of the problem. Moving beyond the immediate politics, what are the long-term solutions? Experts point to several necessary reforms. First, the digitization and centralization of bursary applications to reduce political intermediation. Second, the need to increase the overall education budget to reduce the reliance on parent-based financing. Third, the strengthening of social protection programs like the Inua Jamii cash transfers to provide a more stable base for household finances, making school fees less of a catastrophic expense. The current administration under President William Ruto has championed the bottom-up economic transformation agenda, which places education and social protection at its core. However, the implementation and scaling of these programs to meet the enormous need remains a work in progress. The reality for families in Soweto and Donholm is that national programs can feel distant, while the MP's bursary form is tangible and immediate. In the final analysis, the event this Tuesday exists in a gray area. It provided a necessary service to families in need. It also served a clear political objective for Babu Owino as he builds his profile for a gubernatorial run. The two are not mutually exclusive. The real test will be in the follow-through. How many of those distributed forms will translate into actual awards? Will the awards be distributed fairly and transparently? And perhaps most importantly, will this be part of a consistent, year-in, year-out effort to support education, or will it fade after the 2027 elections? For the students whose education hangs in the balance, the answers to these questions are more than political analysis. They are the difference between a future realized and a future deferred. The story of bursaries in Mbakasi East is a microcosm of Kenya's broader struggle to democratize education. It's a story of scarce resources, political imperatives, and human aspiration. As the 2027 election cycle gains momentum, we can expect to see more of these events across Nairobi and the country. The challenge for voters is to appreciate the immediate help while demanding the systemic changes that would make such politically timed distributions less of a necessity. For now, in the homes of So Weito and Don Home, families are filling out those forms, hoping for the best. And in the offices of aspiring leaders, the calculus of service and strategy continues. This has been a Kenya News Update Today deep dive. We've presented the numbers, the narratives from the strategist, the activist, and the community, and the complex landscape of education funding. The debate is ongoing. What's your perspective? Is the MP's bursary drive a net positive for his constituents, or does it highlight a broken system? Share your thoughts with us. Subscribe to Kenya News Update Today for more in-depth analysis of the stories shaping Kenya. Thank you for watching.